one waitress, one conceited billionaire, and one grand piano. What began as a mean-spirited attempt to shame her unfolded into a moment that left every mouth closed and every ego bruised. You won't believe how she reclaimed the room with nothing but her talent. Before we dive in, kindly let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and support the channel so you never miss an episode like this one. It was a soft, warm Friday evening. The Gilded Fig, a high-end restaurant nestled in the heart of Savannah, Georgia, buzzed with low conversations and lazy laughter. Glasses clinked, servers glided between tables, and from a shadowed corner, a piano murmured smooth jazz, stitching elegance into the air. Naomi, 25, moved through the crowd with practiced grace. Her black apron didn't stand out, and neither did her polite smile. But behind her eyes lived a quiet fire, sharp and waiting. She carried trays with poise and dreams with weight, dreams far louder than the soft music or murmuring voices. To the wealthy patrons she served, she was just part of the furniture. But under that modest uniform was a woman made for something grander, and one man's arrogance was about to unlock it. Naomi's heart had never belonged to table service, it belonged to music. Since childhood, the piano had been her sanctuary, a place where emotions lived freely, every joy, ache and silent longing poured out through her fingers. But dreams, however beautiful, didn't pay rent. Long shifts at the Gilded Fig weren't passion, they were survival, one step closer to the music conservatory she ached to attend. Almost no one knew about the music inside her. Just a few co-workers had seen her during quiet moments, sneaking into the back room, letting her hands wander across the keys of the old upright piano during her breaks. That night, as the dinner rush eased and conversation dipped, the door burst open and in strolled Bradley Vance. Instantly recognizable, the billionaire tech mogul entered like a man expecting applause, trailed by sleek suits and smug grins. With a reputation for cruelty masked as charm and a taste for theatrical displays, his arrival pulled every staff member a little taller, a little tenser. Naomi's co-workers exchanged quiet glances. Bradley Vance was a name that came with a warning. He wasn't the kind of guest who just dined, he tested patience, poked pride, and reveled in discomfort. But for Naomi, he was just one more table in a sea of them, another task to get through. Or so she thought. As Bradley scanned the room, his gaze caught on her. There was a flicker, interest, perhaps amusement, then the slow curl of a smirk. Naomi felt his eyes settle, heavy and deliberate. She ignored it, keeping her focus sharp, moving from table to table, topping off water, clearing dishes, doing her best to stay invisible. But Bradley had already made up his mind. Tonight she'd be his amusement. Naomi grew up in a quiet stretch of South Carolina, where big dreams often stayed just that, dreams. Her mother, a strong-willed nurse working back-to-back shifts, kept the family afloat with little more than grit and grace. Music was their constant companion. An old record player and a weathered, slightly off-key piano gifted by a kind neighbor became Naomi's world. That piano became her hiding place, her voice. While other kids chased fireflies, she chased notes, teaching herself the language of melody. Pop songs at first, then classical pieces she found in battered music books from thrift stores. Her gift didn't stay hidden long, she played in church, at school events, small-town fairs. But talent couldn't erase reality. Recognition didn't pay tuition. And as her skill grew, so did the weight of the barriers between her and the life she dreamed of. By 18, the truth had settled in, music would have to wait. The scholarships never came and family needed her more. Naomi shelved her concert dreams, trading them for late shifts and steady pay. But she never let go completely. The piano wasn't just a dream, it was her reflection. When she moved to Savannah, the Gilded Fig wasn't just a job. It was chosen. Not for the wage, but for the grand piano resting in the corner, polished and quiet. She rarely touched it, but its presence was a silent reminder her music was still alive, just waiting. That night, as Bradley and his crew slipped into their seats, Naomi approached with the confidence that came from repetition. Tray steady, smile in place. Bradley ordered the most expensive scotch, tossing out a joke loud enough to ripple through nearby tables. She didn't flinch, just nodded, professional and poised. Naomi, he read from her name tag, his tone playful but sharp. Sounds like someone with secrets. She blinked, caught off guard, but smiled faintly and moved on. Orders in hand, she disappeared into the kitchen, unaware of the grin he shared with his friend, or how his gaze trailed her every step. He wasn't just watching. He was plotting. And Naomi? She was about to become the center of a scene she never signed up for. Still, the evening played on as usual, wrapped in laughter and clinking cutlery, just moments before everything changed. Naomi kept her stride even, refusing to meet Bradley's stare as she moved through the dining room. She'd handled difficult guests before, but something about him felt more than unpleasant. He was intentional. Not just impolite but calculated. His presence wasn't loud, it was invasive, like smoke creeping under a door. By the time appetizers were placed, Bradley was already in full display. He bragged loudly about his wealth, his ventures, his climb to the top, dropping smug remarks about people with small dreams and soft hands. His companions laughed on cue. Across the room, guests exchanged uneasy glances. Naomi did her best to stay present, counting steps, managing plates. But when she returned with a bottle of wine, Bradley sprang his trap. "So tell me, Naomi," he said loud enough to draw attention. "What do you do when you're not waiting tables? A woman like you must have aspirations." The words hit harder than expected. She paused mid-pour, breath caught. "I play piano," she said carefully, voice almost too soft to hear. His eyes sharpened. A grin followed, too wide, too slick. "A pianist? How charming," he said, drawing out the word. "Well then, why not grace us with a tune? Let's see what dreams sound like." Naomi froze. The room hushed around her, his words hanging thick like smoke. "Oh, I couldn't," she said quickly, laughing nervously. "I'm just here to serve tonight." But Bradley leaned forward, unwilling to let it drop. "Nonsense," he boomed, waving toward the piano. "It's right there. Show us what you've got. Surely a rising star isn't shy of a little attention?" His companions snickered, clearly entertained. Other guests turned their heads, drawn by the growing noise. Naomi's chest tightened. She felt their eyes, some curious, some amused, all waiting. The pressure built fast, hot and sharp. She wanted to refuse, to step away, but the dare was out there now, waiting to either break her or prove her. "I really shouldn't," she murmured, scanning the room for a lifeline. But even her co-workers hesitated, unsure how to help. Bradley leaned back with a smug sip of scotch. I get it," he said, voice heavy with mockery. "All talk. No talent. What a letdown." The words hit like ice to the chest. Naomi's hands curled into fists. She wasn't confrontational, not by nature, but something about how he said it, how he dismissed her like she was nothing, struck a place she'd buried deep. Then came her mother's voice, gentle but firm in her memory. "Don't let anyone shrink you, Naomi. You're more than they can see." A quiet stillness fell between them. Something inside her shifted. Naomi looked at the piano, then back at Bradley. His arrogant smirk dared her to fold, but she didn't. "All right," she said, calm but firm. "I'll play." The room tightened with expectation as she walked toward the piano. Every step felt like walking a tightrope between fear and defiance. The restaurant quieted to a hush as she reached the grand piano. The chandelier's light poured down on her like a spotlight, pulling her from the shadows and placing her at the center of every gaze. Her fingers quivered as she sat on the bench, the keys gleaming like polished teeth, daring her to try. Behind her, Bradley lounged smugly, looking as though the show was his to direct, as if he'd already claimed victory. Naomi took a slow breath, eyes closed, chest tight. Her heart thundered against her ribs. This wasn't church. This wasn't a friendly room or a safe crowd. This felt like a test, and she was being measured. Still, she didn't retreat. Her hands lowered to the keys. They were cold and smooth like glass. Then came the first notes, soft, uncertain, barely audible. A chair squeaked. A cough echoed near the back. But Naomi played on. Naomi tuned them out. Her focus narrowed as she sank into the music. She picked a piece etched into her bones, Claire de Lune, a soulful rendition that always felt like home. The melody drifted softly at first, winding through the room like smoke, gentle but steady. With every measure, her confidence deepened. The music grew bolder. Her fingers moved with the ease of old muscle memory, though her heart beat wild in her chest. Each note felt like truth spilling out, unspoken memories folded into every chord. Her mother's tired smile after night shifts. The endless evenings practicing alone. Dreams once shelved but never forgotten. Conversation faded. The restaurant, once buzzing, fell into a hush. Even Bradley had gone still, his whispering silenced by something heavier. Naomi didn't have to turn around to feel it. The air had changed. The mockery had evaporated. What remained hovered on the edge between wonder and reverence. She kept playing, letting go, letting every ounce of herself rise through the keys. In that moment, she wasn't a server in uniform or a girl chasing what might never be. She was simply Naomi, an artist, fully seen, fully heard. Her fingers danced over the keys, pulling out emotions so deep and raw they seemed to hang in the air like mist. When she struck the final chord, the room held its breath. Silence followed, thick, reverent, broken only by the fading echo of the last note. Naomi remained still, her hands hovering over the piano, unsure of what might come next. Then, like a spark catching flame, the room burst into applause. It was thunderous, echoing off the high ceilings, wrapping around her like a warm embrace. Some diners stood, clapping so hard it made her eyes sting. From the sidelines, her co-workers joined in, pride shining in their eyes. Bradley stayed seated. The smirk he'd worn like armor was gone, replaced with something unreadable, shock, maybe even shame. He clapped slowly, the sound thin and forced. But even his hollow approval couldn't dim the moment. Naomi had done more than perform, she had taken back her power. And no amount of arrogance could erase what she'd just proven. As the applause faded, the room let out a breath, as if everyone had been holding it with her. Naomi rose slowly, her legs still unsteady, but her posture unshaken. She looked around, really looked, and for the first time that evening she saw not customers but witnesses. People who had just seen something real. Their eyes weren't amused or dismissive anymore. They were wide, respectful. She didn't glance at Bradley right away. Instead, she gave a quiet nod to a woman near the front who had clapped the hardest, a soft smile tugging at Naomi's lips. It wasn't pride swelling in her chest, it was release. Release from fear. Release from invisibility. But then, inevitably, her gaze drifted toward Bradley. He hadn't moved. His hands were folded tightly in front of him, elbows on the table, his expression unreadable. Gone was the smug curve of his mouth. Gone was the certainty. In its place, a practiced stillness, like a man unsure if he should admit defeat or pretend he hadn't just lost. "Well," Bradley finally said, his voice louder than it needed to be, slicing through the fragile hush. "That was unexpected." He forced a laugh. Light, awkward. "Hollow. I suppose real talent does show up in the most unlikely places." The words dropped flat. His companions shifted, unsure whether to smile, laugh, or say nothing at all. Naomi tilted her head, studying him with calm precision. His words tried to offer peace, but they rang empty, lacking the courage to fully own the moment. "Thank you," she said, voice steady and sure. There was no softness in her tone, no trace of resentment either. Just control. Strength. She wouldn't shrink for his comfort. Not after everything. Her music had already said more than any words could. Bradley cleared his throat, shifting beneath the quiet weight of every eye in the room. He waved a hand toward the waiter, reaching for a distraction, another drink, another excuse to escape the spotlight now turned inward. "You've got quite a gift," he muttered, the compliment grudging at best. Naomi met his gaze, steady as stone. "We all do," she replied. "It's what you do with it that means something." Her words weren't loud, but they landed like truth always does, quiet and undeniable. The room held still again, her response cutting through the space with the gentlest sting. Bradley shifted in his seat, the arrogance slipping further from his posture with each second that passed. The diners slowly eased back into their meals, but the mood in the room had shifted completely. Where once there had been the soft drone of luxury and polite indifference, there was now a deeper current, an unspoken reverence, maybe even admiration, for the woman who had reminded them all what it meant to be real. Bradley wasn't just embarrassed, he was uncovered. And charm, no matter how well practiced, couldn't hide what had just happened. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had seen her. Naomi rose from the piano bench, the moment pressing softly into her chest like a weight she had finally learned to carry. As she walked back to her station, her co-workers greeted her with quiet smiles and subtle nods, the kind that say, "We saw you and we're proud." She still had glasses to clear and plates to run, but something about her presence had changed. Her chin was lifted, her steps sure. Bradley's table had gone quiet. The same group who had chuckled so freely at her expense now sat subdued, avoiding her gaze. The smug noise that once surrounded them had dissolved, leaving behind nothing but a heavy, telling silence. The evening carried on, but something in Naomi had shifted. With every step through the dining room she felt more grounded, more sure of herself. Her confidence unfolded quietly, blooming in places she hadn't realized were still waiting to grow. As she poured water and cleared dishes, diners paused to speak. "You're a gift," an elderly woman whispered as Naomi gently set down her coffee. "I've never been moved like that," said a man near the back. "Don't stop. Whatever you do, keep going." Each word landed softly but deeply. These weren't just pleasantries, they were confirmation of her sacrifice, her struggle, of the long road that had brought her here, and the music that had carried her all the way. But not everyone could offer grace. When Naomi returned to Bradley's table with the check, he looked up with a flicker of something between irritation and reluctant respect. "You've made your point," he muttered, voice clipped. "No need to rub it in." Naomi stood still for a breath, then met his eyes evenly. "I wasn't trying to prove anything to you," she said quietly. "I just needed to play." He didn't answer, just shifted in his seat, fingers tapping restlessly against the table. The room around them knew what had happened, the shift in weight, the turn in tide. He wasn't the one in control anymore. As Bradley scrawled his name on the receipt, his silence said everything. One of Bradley's companions, a younger man with gentler eyes, glanced up at Naomi and said quietly, "You were incredible." "Really?" His words caught her off guard. For a heartbeat, she saw something unexpected in that table, a trace of sincerity among the polished ego she had dismissed as hollow. "Thank you," she said softly, a faint smile crossing her lips before she turned away. The night drew to a close with Bradley's group slipping out, not with swagger but in silence. No final laugh. No dramatic exit. Just retreat. Naomi watched them go, but there was no victory in her chest. No anger either. Bradley wasn't on her mind anymore. Her thoughts were already reaching forward. That night's tips surprised her more than usual, enough to cover rent and still set aside something for those piano lessons she kept putting off. As she locked the restaurant doors and stepped into the cool night air, Naomi breathed in deeply. The cold nipped at her cheeks, but inside she felt warm with something she hadn't held in years, certainty. She wasn't just someone in a uniform. Not just someone with a forgotten dream. She was a musician, a storyteller through sound, and no smug insult, no money shortage, no flicker of fear could unmake that. And as her steps echoed down the quiet street, her mind wasn't on Bradley or his table. It was on the road ahead, where her music finally felt like it had somewhere to go. Naomi sat at the edge of her old bench, the wood creaking beneath her as her fingers danced across the keys of her battered upright piano. The sound wasn't perfect, no velvet-rich tones like the grand at La Fontaine, but the music still lived, still breathed from somewhere deep inside her. Something had shifted since that night. It wasn't just a small victory, it was a quiet awakening. A recognition that her gift didn't need permission or applause. It didn't have to be explained. It simply was, and that was enough. Word of her performance had rippled through the city. Stories passed from table to table, whispered in coffee shops, shared in line at bakeries. Then one afternoon her phone rang. A man's voice on the other end, soft-spoken, curious. He'd been there that night. A music producer from Nashville. No promises of stardom, no sugar-coated illusions. Just an offer to record a demo, an invitation to step forward. Naomi said yes. Not because she believed it would change her life overnight, but because, for the first time, it felt like her path was unfolding. And she wasn't afraid of where it led. For so long she'd let doubt hold the pen, writing lines of limitation across her dreams. But now something was different. She saw herself clearly. And in that clarity she discovered what had always been her truest strength, her ability to stand in her own truth, raw and real, without apology. The moment with Bradley Vance wasn't just a public embarrassment flipped into triumph, it was a testament to the power of self-respect. Bradley, with all his arrogance and status, had no hold over Naomi. He became the embodiment of every doubt, every dismissive voice she'd ever battled. And she answered them all, not with anger, not with pride, but with the simple, undeniable truth of her talent. To anyone watching, Naomi's message rang clear. Don't let anyone else define your worth. The world is full of people like Bradley Vance, loud voices who try to make others small so they can feel big. But real power? It comes from knowing who you are and letting your passion speak louder than their judgment. As she closed the piano lid and ran her fingers over its worn wood, Naomi smiled. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, it truly felt like hers. And what about you? What dream have you kept tucked away because of fear or doubt? Don't wait for someone like Bradley to challenge you. Take the step now. If Naomi's story moved you, subscribe for more stories of courage, growth, and transformation. Yours could.